so other people can look at it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Marty Paginen. I want to take this opportunity to welcome you to this graveside service today. Thanks for your flexibility. I think it's much more comfortable in here for all of us anyway. As you know, we've gathered together to pay tribute to David House, to celebrate his life together, but also certainly to acknowledge his passing. I am reminded of the words that the ancients wrote when they said that the Lord himself is close to the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. God is our refuge, our strength, a very present help in trouble. And so we have gathered together today to celebrate all the wonderful attributes that made David who he was. We've come together to remember the relationships that he enjoyed throughout his lifetime, and all of those things that we hold close to our hearts that remind us of how special he was. And we will honor his life in all of its aspects today. I am convinced that everyone's life is a gift. Would you agree? Everyone's life is a gift. Everyone's life is special, and everyone's life tells a story. Now, of course, the stories of our lives are not stories that everybody in the world would want to listen to or be interested in, but those who are connected by friendship or family or love, the stories of someone's life, the story of someone's life is very significant, very meaningful, and worth retelling and appreciating for sure. And David's story began back on November 20th, 1959. He was born David Bruce House to Ossie and Betty in Waterloo, one of two children, a brother to Dorothy here. David attended Bluevale Collegiate in Waterloo, went on then to the University of Waterloo, where he enrolled in the electrical engineering program. After graduating, David worked at Bell Northern Research in Ottawa, then moved to England and to Florida, and finally back to Waterloo, where he worked for Research in Motion until he retired at age 51. David enjoyed camping, being outdoors. He appreciated his time on the Bruce Peninsula. He was a member of a hiking club, attended St. Andrew's Church, was part of the Sierra Club, and a professional engineering association as well. Computers were always of interest to David, and he enjoyed fixing things, and he was always very meticulous and precise, as you know. I would say probably a perfectionist at heart. David was somewhat of a private person, but he was certainly loving and loyal to his family and to his friends, caring for his mother after his father passed away about 16 years ago, and of course to Bailey, his golden retriever. The story of David's life ended when he passed away on May the 16th of this year. He was just 61 years of age. Helen Keller once wrote, "What we once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never lose, for all that we love deeply has become a part of us." And I find that to be true about all relationships, that even though we're separated by time or by distance or even by death, the person whom we loved is still in our hearts, even though we don't see them. And the love we have for them carries on, doesn't it? A little bit more hard to express sometimes. We have to be creative about that. But those that we deeply love are always a part of us, and we will, in one sense, never lose them. So I have been provided a number of words of tribute and eulogies from family members that have written about David, and it's my honor to read these at this time. I'll certainly mention who wrote these as I begin each of them. First of all, Dorothy, David's sister. You never appreciate how important someone is to you or how much your heart aches for them until they are gone, especially when it's sudden. David was more than 7 years younger than I was, but as we grew older, I always thought of him as more knowledgeable, competent, worldly, and having more common sense than I ever had. I never made a major purchase without consulting him first. If something broke, he was my first call. He was always willing to help. Often he would research something and then call me back with more information. We shared so many great memories through the years, field trips to Fergus and Lion's Head, taking on Mom's back deck, which David built, Christmases at Mom's beautifully decorated house, and his trips to Florida. We had the best family, loving parents, and although we did have fights as kids, we were always there for each other. He took great interest and joy in his niece and nephew and families. He always kept up with Brad, Katie, Mac, and Bertie. David set up our private group page on Facebook where he could share pictures and opinions on various subjects. After our dad passed away, he took great care of Mom. And that was when David got his one and only dog, a golden retriever, Bailey. Bailey was the most gentle and loving dog I've known. That says a lot because I've owned and loved several dogs over the years. I think he got Bailey just as much for Mom as for himself. Both David and Bailey went to heaven just a few days apart. David also chose his friends carefully, and he sure picked some good ones. In the past 6 years, I have come to know two of them, Steve and Susan, are two outstanding people who jumped right in to a difficult situation to help me and my mom. They never complained, and they've always taken care of things I've never even thought of. Steve tracked down David's friends from pretty much all over the world, and I'm so glad that David had friends of good character. You are truly blessed to have friends like this. David and Bailey too, you are so very much loved and missed. Thank you for being my brother and the wonderful person that you have become. I will love you forever. Thank you so much, Dorothy. And here are some words written by David's niece, Katie. Sitting here at my desk on this gloomy Tuesday morning, I'm trying to collect my thoughts and memories of my Uncle David. It is impossible to paraphrase in a short letter, so I will attempt to recount the things that will forever belong to Uncle David. Toyota Supras, for one. I'm sure everyone is familiar with his dear Supra that he couldn't just seem to part with. The car was a staple, or should I say an eyesore, in the final years it remained at Grandma Betty's. Next, there is the TV show How It's Made. Anytime that David was at Grandma's house, it was an unspoken rule that he controlled the remote and that we all watched. We did not mind, Every show he picked was mentally stimulating and interesting. I once asked him what his favorite movie was. I was curious because he was such a critic of movies and in particular, and was very particular with what he liked. He said it was A Fish Called Wanda. Guacamole will always be, am I saying that right? Guacamole, okay,
Yes.
Sorry. Guacamole, I've never said guacamole at a funeral service before. Guacamole will always be Uncle David's too. He made a mean guacamole dip. As strange as it seems, I don't think I ever saw David before 2 p.m. in the afternoon. He didn't do mornings. Then there was the obvious golden retriever, David's beloved Bailey, the only woman in his life and the lady he could stand to live with. Bailey was our first dog, and our daughter, Bertie, met. Bailey was kind and gentle as they come, just like her owner. Maybe God felt losing Bailey was too painful for David, so he took him first. Like the saying, God only gives what you can handle. David will continue to live on through our memories. I can hear his voice clear as day, speaking of his disdain for politics and politicians and his outside-the-box point of views on most subjects. We would debate on our Facebook family group who was the worst president/prime minister. He loved Costco, and years prior, his groceries would litter our counter at my childhood home in Tallahassee when we would visit. I am tearful as I sit here and recount so many good memories with my generous and so thoughtful uncle. When the pandemic began and raged on and on, I never dreamed time would run out and I would not see David, a life cut too short. I am grateful my husband, Mac, knew him. Mac always said he loved picking David's brain, how smart David was. Our daughter Bertie took to him, and I'm so glad he met her. Our last trip to Ontario, Uncle David gave Bertie something walk-on piano.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah,
A
a walk-on piano. He lugged it through the Toronto and Tallahassee airports. I'm not even sure if Bertie could ever walk yet. The toy is in her room. I don't think I'll ever be able to part with it now. Uncle David would probably cringe having this attention and fuss over his death. The religious portions too. He was a firm believer in the Big Bang Theory, but God makes allowances, and funerals are for us, the living, the grieving, and the ones receiving a semblance of closure. I smile, thinking of David, Grandpa, and Bailey together, so I will leave it with this. We shall never see him like this again. I love you, Uncle David and Bailey. And then this is to the House family, and it's from John and Kate Hendel. My husband John and I are so sorry for the loss of your son and brother, Dave. We are his neighbors to the right in unit number 9 and have enjoyed getting to know David over the years, living next to each other. No one else in this townhome complex had a better lawn and garden than Dave. I don't think there was ever a more diligent waterer than him. Dave always took the time to have a chat and offer help on many occasions when we needed it around the house, often shoveling our walkway and keeping an eye when we were away. We were truly sad to look over and see him on his deck watering out on the lawn with his beloved Bailey, enjoying the weather, but not the winter weather, as he often said. Dave and Bailey were truly the best neighbors, and we hardly ever, or probably will ever have. There is a profound emptiness in our whole complex without their presence. We will sincerely miss our daily chats with David and the infectious and sweet love from our dear Bailey. Sending you our sincere condolences on your loss and praying that your memories provide you with comfort. Sincerely, John and Kate Hendel. And these are from other friends that have sent in some words for us to share today. David lived in the UK for a few years in the early 1990s. He made several friends there. Some are still in the UK and others living in other countries. These are some sections of the notes they sent. Hawk from the UK wrote, "When Dave first arrived at work in the UK, in the true tradition of British disorganization, the department was unprepared for his arrival. My boss was going to turf me out of my office because Dave was sent to do specific work. However, Dave rejected that idea because he felt like it was not a very nice thing to do. At that point, I thought to myself, here's a man that is rare because he clearly had higher principles than myself." Tony, who now lives in California, described Dave. Dave was a great conversationalist. He was insightful, sarcastic, and humorous. He was unique and a pleasure to be around. His company was enjoyed by many. I quickly grew to like him. We often played billiards, hiked, and went on camping trips. Even after we both moved from Ottawa, we stayed in touch and visited each other. On a couple of trips back to Canada, I brought my wife and son to meet him. He was someone I wanted my family to know. Glenn, a longtime friend from Ottawa, describes their motorcycling adventures down back roads and often ending up at Aurora Gorge. Glenn and his wife and son, Jacob, got to know Dave quite well and referred to him as Uncle Dave. Dave was always pushed Jacob to think outside the box and challenge him to think differently. Jacob decided to attend the University of Waterloo. As we were in the region more to visit Jacob, our visits with Dave grew more notable. About this is a time that we knew Jacob had a guardian angel that was close to help him out if needed. Nuri from the UK talked about his long friendship with Dave and their video conferences with other UK friends. Some of those calls went on for hours. I know it was something Dave really liked, and we talked about all sorts of subjects. Sometimes the conversations descended into lots of laughter, as Dave in particular liked to provide the ammunition for Hawk's off-the-wall sense of humor. John, also from the UK, remembers Dave's dry sense of humor. He wrote, "People in the UK have a similar sense of humor, so he fit in quite well. Work-wise, Dave was very well respected, looked up to in the work setting, as his knowledge and experience were valuable to a relatively new expanding research and development lab for BNR in the UK. While we were in the UK, Dave and myself were introduced to a new sport for each of us, hill walking. We took weekend trips to hill walk, to Cornwall, Somerset, Snowdonia in Wales, and several other trips in Scotland. Dave also took trips in different places across Europe. John from New Zealand also had similar memories of Dave's sense of humor, his integrity, his work ethic. He also liked to hike and camp. But John wrote, "And lastly, my overriding memory of his musical taste was his aim to correct every version of Danny Boy that I ever recorded. I never did find out what it was about that song that got to him." And finally, Ben from Scotland, Ben, who is now living in Scotland, summed up Dave well. Dave was certainly a talented engineer, handyman, philosopher, pundit, humorist, advisor, accountant, investor, and many more. He was a man also of many contradictions. He was cranky, yet funny. He was non-committal, yet dependable. He was irreverent, yet sensitive to the feelings of others. He rebelled against modern life, yet adapted and prospered. Excuse me. He questioned the value of a career, and yet was industrious. He had a faulty memory, yet he was a keen chronicler. He was a free spirit, yet a meticulous planner. He was a loner, and yet he forged lasting friendships. He was an enigma, and yet an open book to willing listeners. He will be missed. Well, although it was not in the voice of those who wrote, I'm so honored to have been able to have read these. And I know that there are those who will be watching this via videotape online after. And I hope that those who have written these, especially from different parts of the world, that you'll hear the sound of your voice through mine today, as I've been able to honor David's life. As we consider ways to remember and to celebrate David's life as we move forward, there are so many thoughts that went through my mind, but I kind of boiled it down to just three that I want to encourage all of us to take with us today. Number one, as we celebrate David's life, we can do that through the memories that were shared with him. David had friends and family members that were so important to him, and anybody that knew David was connected to him. There were obviously memories that are attached to those connections. And I guess my encouragement to all of us who have connection and memories is that we hold on to those memories. For some, holding on to those memories might mean that you hold them literally close to your heart. You don't share them. You treasure and value them because they're so precious. Other people, like myself, a little bit more outgoing and a little bit more talkative, will speak about those memories and will share them, and that will be a way for us to honor David. Whether you treasure them close in your heart or whether you speak them freely, we're all different in that way. I want to encourage you to hold on to those and to hang on to the memories, because I think we honor David not by trying to forget this day, although it is filled with pain, but by holding on to the memories. And as we do so, we will celebrate and honor David's life as we move forward. I secondly wrote that we celebrate David through the expressions of gratitude we share with each other. We honor David by being thankful. Even on a day like today, which is difficult to be thankful. I mean, I'm not particularly happy about the weather, but we can be thankful for the rain, can't we? Because it provides nourishment to the plants and to the earth. We're sad today in saying goodbye to someone so wonderful, and yet there is a sense of thankfulness that we have been able to be part of his story, part of his life. Maybe not the whole thing, but part of it for sure. And there can be a choice we make in our hearts to choose gratitude, to choose thankfulness. We're thankful for our families. We're thankful for friendships. We can be thankful for the things that bring us a sense of enjoyment, the hobbies and the pastimes, the art and recreation, the sports and leisure that we enjoy. We can be thankful for our work and the ability to provide for our dependents. We're thankful for food and shelter. And as I mentioned, we can also be thankful to be able to say that we have known David and have been part of his life story. Leslie Gerber wrote, "Yesterday is history, tomorrow's a mystery, but today is a gift." And that's why they call it the present. And I love that quotation because it reminds me that today is the present, right? It's the moment we live in, it's the now. But it's also our present, right? It's a gift that's been given to each of us. And with all gifts, we receive them, we enjoy them, we use them, sometimes we share them. But at the end of the day, we're grateful for them. And I trust all and hope all of us will pause sometime today and with gratitude in our hearts give thanks for all of these things. And I believe we honor David as we do so. And finally, I think we celebrate David by living out the very best qualities he lived out in his life. I'm convinced that everyone can live a life of greatness and goodness. And David lived and modeled a life of virtues and values that are honorable. Values like honesty and hard work, dedication and loyalty, love and sacrifice, generosity, respect for others, a quiet confidence in who he was, humility, grace, and so many more. And as we identify and embrace these values, we can begin to live them out in our lives as a way to honor David in an extraordinary way and be thankful for his life. We value honesty because he was honest, and so we are honest with each other. We value work and the commitment to do our very best because that's what he did. We're loving, caring, and compassionate regardless of whether we are outgoing or more reserved. And so there are so many ways we honor and celebrate the memory of our loved ones. We identify graves in cemeteries with grave markers. We plant trees in parks. Sometimes we place flowers on caskets or at grave sites. We make donations to charities. And all of these are wonderful, aren't they? Wonderful ways to honor someone. But I also think that we can celebrate David as we move forward through the memories that we shared, through the expressions of gratitude that we share with each other, and by living out the very best qualities he lived out in his life. And I know that as you move forward, you'll remember the good things and the great things that made David who he was, and you will live them out as a way to honor his memory. There is a poem that is quite often read at memorial services like this. The poem was written thousands of years ago, actually by a man whose name as well was David. And David, the author of this poem, was a bit of a man's man. He worked outdoors with his hands. He was a military man skilled in the use of the weapons of his day. He could defend himself if needed. Was not only strong physically, but was strong in character and moved up the ranks to become the leader of his nation, the king of his country. But he was also a songwriter. He was a poet. He was a very talented and skilled musician. And I think if you got to know David, the author of this poem, you would say he had sort of a hard and tough exterior, but a very soft and romantic inside to him. I think about a person like that, and I think to myself, there's someone that can face anything that comes across the path of his life. But David was just like us. He felt the sadness in his heart as he said goodbye to his friends and loved ones. And we believe that David possibly wrote this poem shortly after a service, maybe not unlike this, where he said goodbye to one of his family members or one of his friends. And so it's King David of Israel that wrote what we now refer to as the 23rd Psalm. And it reads as follows. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. For those that are here present in the chapel and for those that will be watching online after the service is completed, again, I just want to say thank you for being here and for standing with and beside the family and others that are grieving at this time. Sometimes it is difficult to know exactly what to say at a time like this, but let me just assure you that your very presence here speaks volumes of your love and support, and I hope that that will just continue in the weeks and months ahead. We are not going to be going back to the cemetery for a final committal, so I'm just going to share very briefly a prayer of benediction, some words of committal, and then we'll conclude with the Lord's Prayer. And so let us pray. Our God and Father in heaven, you place us into families and you give us friends to be our companions. And this morning we are grateful for David and for the love and friendship that many shared with him. Thank you for all of those things that made him special. His love for his family, his deep desire to meet the needs of others, and his love for life. We pray that your peace would come down upon the sadness of missing him. May you comfort our hearts. And we thank you that you understand our needs at this time and that you enter into our sorrow. We commit his body to the ground, his soul and spirit into your care. In faith and hope that you always do what is good, we now release David from our care into yours, earth to earth, ashes to ashes, and dust to dust. May he forever rest in peace. And we do pray in the name of the one who taught us to pray. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This concludes these services here today for David. On behalf of his family, I would just like to thank you all very much for being here. You're certainly not in a rush to have to leave. You're certainly welcome to visit with each other. I know it's been a long time coming that we've been able to gather in groups like this, so I don't want you to feel like you need to rush out. Thank you very much.